Hello everyone and welcome along to your Sunday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett and I'm your host this evening, freshly home from a freezing cold Ibrox, where it was Tommy and I actually were on the gantry for today's game against St Johnstone. I'm joined tonight, as I said there, by Tommy McIntyre and also Ross Chalmers. Tommy, start with you first of all. How are you doing?
Still thawing out. I think actually I've just noticed it kind of red and stuff like that, but it was very chilly, both maybe on and off the park actually. So I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, we absolutely will. We're joined by Ross Chalmers. He may actually be colder than us because he was sitting up in the club deck. So how are you doing, Ross?
It was not bad. I actually had to sit next to Kale today as well, so that was an enjoyable experience up there. But yeah, I enjoyed the game for the first 25 minutes. I'm sure we'll talk about the rest that happened today after that. So yeah, all good. Same as Tommy, a bit cold today, but as what it is.
Yeah, we'll get stuck into everything. There's plenty going on around Rangers Football Club at the moment, more off the park than there is on the park. I think it's fair to say we'll get stuck into today's game against St Johnstone, where Rangers ran out 3-1 winners at Ibrox. It probably should have been more comprehensive if we'd kept actually just playing football for the full game. We'll also get stuck into what happened off the park today at Ibrox around the protests and the different points of view from that. We're really keen to hear your points of view as well, so please do let us know in the comments and we'll bring as many up as we can on the screen. And we'll also dig deep into the Patrick Stewart statement from yesterday to the media, some of the key talking points that came out of that, how we feel about it, and again we want to hear you guys' comments, so please do stick them in the chat and we'll bring as many up as we can as possible. Ross, I'll come to you first since I sat beside Tommy and I know what his thoughts on the game were, but what...
I'm code for I've had enough of Tommy already today. So that's the code for.
A 3-1 win today, Ross, on the face of it, pretty comfortable. It was an enjoyable first 25 minutes, I'd probably say, and then a really turgid remaining 65 minutes, quick math there, which I'm hoping is right. What did you make? What was your overall assessment of today's match?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was about a recency bias with the way we finished the game, but I thought we were pretty poor again today, to be honest with you. I thought the first 25 minutes, they came out and started strong, but I thought St Johnstone, very much like Hibs did in that first 20 minutes, kind of played into Rangers' hands, and fair play, we took advantage of it. But after that, I just thought the foot was taken off the gas again, and I thought you've seen a lot of the same problems we've seen all season with Rangers, just lacking that real creative spark. Defensively, not looking great either. Of course, that's us conceded from another set piece. And the more I watch that one back, the worse it gets. It's a free header and just outside the 6-yard box. So really disappointing again. But look, I suppose there was no real winners today, right? Rangers just had to get the 3 points. I didn't expect a scintillating performance. We didn't get that. I'm not sure we're going to get that under this manager going forward, unfortunately. And I'm sure we'll dig deeper into that later in the podcast. But yeah, overall, you could probably say a routine 3 points, but I just don't know if that's enough right now. It's certainly not enough to get the support back on side of the manager. There's going to take a lot more, but yeah, all I can say is 3 points. We ensure that gap doesn't get to another ridiculous level, and that's it. That's the only real way I can look at it, Greg. I didn't think there was a lot to take from the game. I thought sloppy individual performances again. So yeah, unfortunately, it seems quite a negative outlook, but I think that's the way I'm looking at everything at the moment when it comes to Rangers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like you, Ross, I don't think there was any winning for Rangers today. There was only losing. I don't think there was any way that it could have come out with opinions changed or anything that's a bit of a feel-good factor. I think there was only ways to lose and go further down the hole, I guess, that it feels like we're in. Tommy, Ross mentioned there about sort of getting the 3 points, but not sure that was enough for Rangers. Is that kind of how you viewed it as well, in terms of it had to be a performance as well? It had to do something to get the fans a little bit excited, if that was even possible.
No, I'm definitely with with you both, because that's the only way it could be. Today's game wasn't going to turn the dial on the relationship that Philippe Clement has with the support and the relationship that we have with this team. You know, they were expected to win. expected maybe in italics given recent results and performances. But yeah, expect St Johnstone to come there and get beaten, and that's what they did. You're right. First 25 minutes, it was good. Let's not walk past the fact that first 25 minutes we scored 3 goals and we're good at home as we have been. And then it kind of slowly died its own death in terms of an actual game to watch and a performance and stuff like that as well. I think second half we can talk about that later. But yeah, this was never going to change the dial anywhere other than negatively if we didn't get the 3 points. So Rangers did what they needed to do from a league performance perspective, which is score a couple of goals, couldn't keep a clean sheet. We'll talk about the conceding of a poor goal, and that's it. I mean, wrap it up. It's not. There's nothing more to that game than that.
Yeah, I'm not going to quite wrap up just yet. We've still got 55 minutes of this podcast to go.
I'm still cold. I was thinking maybe we could get out, but no, I get that, right? What I'm saying though is, from an overarching perspective, this was not going to change the dial on the way that people think and perceive Philippe Clement and his relationship and his ongoing ability to be the Rangers manager.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Ross, I kind of wanted to pick up on both Hamza Igaman and actually all 3 goal scorers. We say Hamza Igaman, Václav Černý and Mohamed Diomande. I thought in the first 25 minutes, all 3 of them were really, really good. Another goal for Hamza Igaman. I thought he looked dangerous again in that opening period. Was it, I guess, did you feel like it was laying the foundations for a really positive performance, particularly from those 3 who went forward?
Yeah, I mean, if you go 3-0 up in 25 minutes, you're thinking this is going to be a big scoreline today. So again, I hate to be too negative, but it is disappointing that you've came out the game after that with only a 3-1 win. Hamza Igaman, every time I see him, impresses me, to be honest with you. I think the level of development we've seen from him already over a couple of months is pretty extraordinary, really. Not a lot of experience behind him, and he's coming in and looking the part. Václav Černý, I think at times frustrates everyone because there's a really, really good player in there, but just that final ball just seems to lack sometimes. Regardless, he still continues to get numbers, and it is something we've looked for a long time in a right-sided player. We've not had that. I think we've always been looking for that 4 or 5 years, and we've found that now, so I'm not going to be too critical. Mohamed Diomande is an interesting one for me because he's someone I looked at against Dundee the other night, and I felt like that was the game for him to really take control of. And maybe in that first 20-25 minutes, we've seen a lot more of that today, but I'm looking for an all-round 90-minute performance from Diomande. I've not seen that for a while. Glad he got his goal because it is something that he was known for in Nordsjælland, for bursting into the box and getting goals, so he's in and around it and he takes advantage of it.
It was a bit of a gift, to be fair, wasn't it? It was a wee bit of a gift.
It is a gift, but he's in the right area, right? So, you know, it's the same with a striker, isn't it? You're in there to capitalise on a mistake, so I'm going to give him credit for that one. But overall, I just think, and I know you tried to put a positive spin on this and I'm falling back to a negative, but with Mohamed Diomande, I really do believe there's a really good player in there. Like, honestly, and I think that's what frustrates me more about him, that I feel the level is there for him to get to, and he's just maybe not hitting it. And I really want him to become that kind of pivot in midfield that we build around. Raskan's obviously the deeper player. I think Diomande's got all the ability there to kick on and really start controlling midfield for Rangers. We've just not seen that yet. Again, I'm hoping that comes, right? Goals, build confidence, whatever. I'm hoping that we'll see more of him. But yeah, I think especially Igaman and Černý, they're really pulling us through at the moment. I thought it was a really nice pass from Danilo for the goal for Černý, to be fair, and I think that's maybe what we've missed in that area in recent weeks with Barami, maybe not up to the level that we'd expect from him. But yeah, I just thought those two in particular are really good, and I think the Igaman and Danilo in the same side at the same time, I think Rangers just look a more attacking threat. I think Barami's a good player. And I really do think there's a role for him at Rangers in the future. But I just think that understanding that Danilo has with Černý really helps us kind of build. And then Igaman has that ability to kind of float in other areas because he knows Danilo will pick up the spaces that he has left. And it just seems to work. And I think that's the frustration with a lot of Rangers fans, that we've went away from that in recent weeks when it was working for us. So there you go. I've tried to finish on a positive for you, Craig. I think the two of them, are pulling us through games at times. Look, we're going to need that over the next few weeks because I don't think that level of performance that we're looking for, I don't think we're going to hit it. I think we're going to have to continue to rely on individuals, and it looks like they're going to be the two that do that for us.
Yeah, Tommy, Ross spoke about Danilo and Igaman there, and obviously the importance of the relationship between Czerny and Danilo. I've seen a lot of discussion around how Rangers play or look a completely different team when we have two strikers in that front three rather than two wide players and one striker. Is that something that you've noticed and something that you, I guess, saw the fruits of today, and especially in the early period of the game?
Yeah, we are better with two strikers. I mean, I think that's pretty much a given. Although you probably can't, in one hand, say we're better with two strikers. We should always play that way, and we want a manager who's got tactical flexibility to be able to mix it up and go with the wide players and all that. So it's a squad game. But yeah, I would always start with the two if we can, because I think they are. There's maybe a case to be made as well that Igaman is the most important player in the squad right now, because he is pulling us through and he's become a focal point. Also, and it's probably not something that will garner me a lot of plaudits from some of the fan base or anything like that, but there's a player that's being developed, and you can tangibly see him being developed at Ibrox and getting better. Right, one of the few success stories.
Yeah,
and so
we had a discussion during the game, Tommy, where and it kind of comes on to the discussion we'll have later about Patrick Stewart's comments and the fact that he said the club wouldn't sell Igaman, but as you said, Igaman, you can see if a club was to bid £10 million for him now, you would almost be hesitant to even consider that, because you can almost see in your head how he would progress over the next 6 to 12 months and how that value would just exponentially increase.
You look at all those factors though. So I'm with you, right? I wouldn't want to sell him. Just be really clear about that. But it's a number up front which can be reinvested in the squad immediately, plus a sell-on clause versus some hatchet man goes through his knee in Scotland and his cruciate goes, or any or his form drops off or whatever, right? It's just a kind of series of selection of choices to say, right, where do I want to get to? But would anybody want to see him get out the door right now? No, unless it was a ridiculous number. I don't think 10 million is a ridiculous number. So yeah, but the point I'm making though is there is actually somebody whereby, because it's been so rare, it's nice for us to point it out every now and again that we unearthed somebody that nobody else was really on top of, and we brought him in, and you can see progression in his game, and he is delivering for us in a first team jersey. There's an argument made that other senior players in the squad should be looking at that and saying, right, let's bring that level of performance. But it's just a nice thing. I just wanted to draw attention to it. With regards to everything else, it still remains to be seen and get uplifted. But with that one, yeah. But to your point, better with two up top, I think. Yeah, and with Danilo coming back in and getting more and more game time, that's only be a positive. I think Bajrami does start to drop out a little bit and be more of a bench player. But again, at least it gives us some options.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Before we move on to the second half, and I guess more of the off the pitch side of things, Ross, I wanted to bring in this comment from Luke Gibson 97. Just picks up on your discussion around Diomande. He says Diomande hasn't got anywhere near our past midfielders of Kamara, Aribo, Tillman, etc. Feel like Dio just does the basics and needs to be more ruthless. There's another comment further down here from Graham Brown. It says Dio needs to realise you've not got time on the ball in Scotland. Where do you think Diomande sits currently versus the midfielders that we've heralded as being really important parts of our team in recent seasons, such as Kamara, Aribo, and Tillman? And then where do you think, in terms of Diomande's development and his ability to play and maximise his ability in the Scottish game that he is?
Yeah, in terms of comparison with previous midfielders, I mean, I absolutely loved Glenn Kamara, so it's going to be difficult for me to compare him against. But I would probably say he's got as much ability, I think, as Glenn Kamara and Joe Aribo. I think Malik Tillman was a level above all of them, to be honest with you. And I think you can see where he has went to now with PSV. And I think I seen stuff in the press the other day that Bayern are looking at potentially bringing him back and things like that. 35 million fee or something that's in the contract. So that probably shows you the level that Malik Tillman was at Rangers and where he could potentially go. I think for me personally, with Mohamed Diomande, is I want to just see a wee bit more of an influence on the game. I don't think he grabs control of the game, and I think that we need in that area. I thought it was apparent against Dundee the other night that you've got Connor Barron in there who does have SPFL experience, but I think we all know that Conor Barron's maybe not at the level to be a starting midfielder for Rangers week in, week out. I think Mohamed Diamande is, and I would expect him to take command of these games, control the games, make an impact. He's really unlucky with the shot that hits the bar the other day against Dundee. But I'm just not seeing enough from him at this moment in time for the ability that I believe he has. Again, I think the system. Yeah, I mean, it probably is down to the system because he is playing in a 2 in midfield, and it maybe doesn't give him that level of freedom that he wants. He would maybe argue that you would see the best of him in a 3, where he can kind of go a bit beyond more often, and he isn't. He doesn't have to be aware of what's behind him so much. There is an argument for that as well. But how long do you sit on that? How long can you say that for? Is it maybe time to adapt? You may have to have an understanding that you're going to play in a midfield too. And it's clear that the manager thinks he is, one of the best midfielders in our squad because he's playing every single week now. I just want to see a wee bit more from him. It's not because I'm not being overly critical for the sake of it. I really do believe there's a really good player in there. I think we could see that as soon as he signed. I just don't think we're seeing enough of an impact on the game. I need to see a wee bit more of that from him. He is one of those players that we talk about. Tommy referenced there about Hamza Egaman. That is someone we brought in, we're developing, right? Mohamed Diamande falls into that bracket as well. You've paid a wee bit more money for him, but ultimately he is someone that we are looking to develop and sell. The argument as well with Mohamed Diamande coming in January was that we had to bring him in at that stage, or we wouldn't have been able to bring him in. He would have probably went to a top 5 league in the summer. So we've done that. There's 2 sides of that, right? Rangers have to give players the platform to develop, but the player also has to take some initiative as well, and they have to push themselves on. And look, I'm not suggesting that Mohamed Diamande isn't working as hard as he can. I'm sure he is. I just want to see a wee bit more in these games where he is the guy that we look at alongside Inigo Man and a Czerny. I want to look at Mohamed Diamande and go, this is the midfielder that's going to drive us through this game. This is the midfielder that's going to grab the game and push us through. I'm not seeing enough of that so far, and I think that's something he needs to develop. If he can develop that and go to the next level, he will be able to make that big move that I'm sure he dreams of. But he's going to have to hit that first, and we're not seeing that enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. I'm not going to talk about the defence today, or I feel like we've touched on that long and hard.
What about Nsiala though? Because I actually thought, not to go over the top, but I thought actually today he looked quite composed in possession. He didn't look out of sorts at all. I thought the other night at Dundee, when the ball came out of the box, at times he looked a wee bit nervous. Yeah. Thought today he looked a lot more assured, more composed. It's not really the game that you're going to look at him and go, oh, this guy's ready. This guy's the level. But I thought it's maybe worth picking out and saying, he's coming into an environment that's maybe not the best right now. And I thought he'd done quite well today and probably deserves a wee bit of credit for that.
I thought he looked much more comfortable than Robin Proper.
He was better, but it's a low bar. It's not as if St Johnstone rocked up with an incredible attacking threat. Not to discount what you're saying, no, Ross, because you're absolutely right. I agree with you that he was solid enough and he did what he had to. I don't know what I thought. Proper was actually okay in sections, Craig. Although some of his diving in
sections for a 31-year-old previous captain of an area division.
I'm definitely not painting myself as a Robin Proper backer here. Definitely not. I think I'm on record as saying that he's not brought what we expected from him. But again, I think St Johnstone didn't really stretch us. But we read what we had to reasonably enough, and Nsiala was part of that. And I thought he stood up to some of the balls into the box reasonably well too. So yeah, credit to the young man rather than credit to the old ex-captain who's not really delivering what we were looking for him.
Yeah, I think our defence and expectations of our defence are really low at this moment in time, mainly driven by injuries, but also by recent performances. So I think that's fair. I think Nsiala is one that people were a bit confused about because there was so much fanfare in the summer about the fact we signed him, but then he was straight into the B team and wasn't really around the first team at all. I think it'll be interesting to see how he develops. And he's probably one of the players that if you subscribe to the view that we're not going to finish it any higher than second, but we're not going to finish any lower than second at this moment in time either, then he's probably one of the players that you try and bleed in a bit more in terms of different.
You mean if you subscribe to the view that we're just going to finish second?
Yeah, I was trying to be more creative with how I said that, Tommy.
Sorry,
try to be more creative in how I said that, but you blew that straight at the water.
Apologies.
I think he's one of the young players, I think, probably along with Bailey Rice. There's probably more of a clamour for Bailey Rice in that sense. But you give these guys game time over the next few months because it's a luxury we wouldn't want to have, but it's a luxury we have over the coming weeks. And I think play them in some tough games and some tough situations and see how they get on, and a bit of a test, I guess. Leon King seems has more than one foot out the door, I think. It's fair to say. No idea if he'll leave in January or not. I'd probably be surprised just from a European homegrown player academy kind of situation, but he might go in the coming weeks. But Tommy, would you agree with that in terms of it's not a situation we want to be in, but we've probably got a bit of a luxury in terms of really finding out not just what the core squad members can offer us, but what those who are younger and potentially up and coming can offer us too?
Up to a point, because I'm with you. I would like to see more young players in. And remember, we're talking about Igmani and Ciala and stuff. There is young players actually in the squad, but bleeding them in, it's always an interesting conversation because, I think finishing second, etc., but putting in too many youngsters and dropping more points, manager's going to come under more pressure, board under more pressure, protests, maybe lose his job, etc., because he's also looking at that as well, and further demoralisation of the squad. And so at what point do you say, right, well, it's wheels up, we're just going to try and build for next season? Which I think is effectively what you're saying to some extent there. Get these boys in, give them tough game time, let them see what it's like in front of the fans in a good mood and in a bad mood, get them ready for next season when we go again with a refreshed young squad at its core and some players over the top of it. But Rangers didn't quite work like that. And there's still Europe, there's still a Scottish Cup, there's still the expectation that we beat teams that we've not been beaten in the recent period. So I'm with you. I would start to get them in as much as possible. I think it's a head scratcher continually for people when they go, we've got young players, and yet in the last 5-10 minutes, we're seeing Kieran Dowell coming on. Right? People cannot square that quite rightly in their mind. And that's up to the manager to say, right, well, I'm willing to give players time in there to show what they can do in a jersey. And I think that's right. It's just not as simple as saying, right, we'll just bleed them all in at the same time. Not that I think you were saying that, right, but there has to be some level of management to it. But I think everybody would get behind, particularly our homegrown ones or guys like Ciala who are coming in and doing a reasonable job. Get them in, get them fit in the jersey, get them ready for next season. Stop playing Deadwood, who have been kicking about the first team. Like, again, I'll reference Mr. Dowell, who have done absolutely nothing and don't deserve to be getting on even for a minute. I'd rather see a youth player coming in, and I think everybody would get behind that.
Yeah,
is Egaman not a perfect example of that, Craig? There was how many months were we all saying that Cyril Dessers isn't up to it? He's not up to it. Yeah, we already know that long term he's not the answer. Let's see Hamza Egaman. Let's see Danilo get more minutes and see what they can do. The two of them are quite clearly the two starting strikers for us now, and Dessers can't get a look in. So it shows you, it's worth giving these boys a chance. I'm with Tommy. You can't just completely write everything off, right? Rangers are about winning as many games as possible. We can't do that lately. And it's all about winning trophies and things, and you probably can't rely on youth players with that. But today, in a game where you're playing St Johnstone at home, bottom of the league, these are the times you should be trying to bed these players in. Oscar Cortez is one I come back to on that. 3.5 million we're paying for him in the summer. You're not starting him against St Johnstone at home. I mean,
he didn't really look up too much when he came on either, did he?
He didn't. I thought he was full of energy and he was trying hard. It was just he was running at players and he looked like.
I think I'd be full of energy and trying hard if I got on the pitch at Ibrox, but I'm not sure I would be delivering very much.
Hold on, I think that's maybe overly glib there, guys. I think he was running at players. He was confident in his pace. He tried to go around the outside a couple of times as well. I mean, I'm with you. He didn't massively affect the game, but I think if you were looking at that with a cold eye, I think he actually went at players a wee bit. I'd be more interested to tie up maybe what you and Ross are saying, because I agree with it, is that, and I think somebody, maybe Graham in the comments as well, if you're looking at the Fraserburgh game and you're going, if I do not see younger players in there starting, then something's wrong, because that is a perfect place to get players on. Have your established players on the bench ready to come and rescue you if needed, but get players in to do the rough and tumble stuff for the first 45, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Right, let's go on to the off-the-field stuff. We probably actually spent a bit longer there on the game than I thought we would, because it was a really straightforward game with not much to talk about.
It's a brutal game, let's be honest.
But yeah, let's go on to the off-the-field stuff. There was obviously statements from the Union Bears and the Rangers Sports Association before the game, urging people to follow their lead, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of walking out in the 55-minute. I guess in protest at, firstly, how the club has been run, also around Philippe Clement still being in the managerial position, and wanting change as we go forward. There were 3 banners. Tommy and I had a bit of an over-under, 3 banners today going on, but there were 3 banners held up, 2 in the first half, 1 at the start of the second half, all targeting the board, all showcasing displeasure, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it at this stage. Maybe that's maybe being kind. Anger would be another way of describing it.
Definitely being kind. Displeasure.
Anger's probably a better way of putting it, towards the board and how the club is being run. In 55 minutes, the Union Bears packed up and left, or attempted to leave. They were kind of held up in the stairway quite a bit for the next 5 minutes or so. There was loads going on in the game. They didn't sing at all throughout the first 55 minutes they were there. They held up the banners, as I mentioned. They didn't celebrate any of the goals that Rangers scored. There was a very clear message coming from them for the first, I guess, until Rangers scored. The stadium was silent. It was almost everyone else was just expectant, and the Union Bears weren't there making the noise, and you could hear the players shouting each other on the park. It's a really strange atmosphere. When the Union Bears did walk out, there were a significant number of boos actually towards them. There were people in all 4 stands that walked out in solidarity with them, but there were also a significant number of boos towards those who were walking out and jeering. Ross, what did you make of it all? It was so strange, and it's clear there's a very big divide in terms of what people think is the right way to go about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a divide in what people think is the right way to go about it. I thought the atmosphere today was just the strangest, weirdest atmosphere I've ever been at a football game. That's outside of Rangers, just any game. I've just actually made a joke to my dad during the game saying, I wonder if this is what all the Premier League games are like. Do you know what I mean? Where there's no, it's like the soul was ripped out of the support today. It was just a weird atmosphere. Took a little bit of time to get used to that. And I actually thought in the first 20-25 minutes, I thought the players in a weird way kind of responded to it, because they didn't have that same level of kind of scrutiny with every single touch. And the way they started the game, I thought, wow, they're absolutely flying here. That obviously transpired to not be the case, but yeah, I just thought overall it's a pretty horrible situation. It's not something I really enjoy talking about, because ultimately it's stuff away from football and it's not really the things that interest me. But yeah, look, I think everyone's entitled to their opinion on this. I think the Union Bears and the RSA are entitled to put their thoughts forward and ask for support on what they were trying to do today. And everyone that left in the 55th minute, I have absolutely no problem with it. It's the right to do. In the same way that I would like the Union Bears and anyone following them to be accepting of the other side's opinion on these things and not criticise, then I would also have probably asked the supporters in the ground today not to boo them when they were leaving. I thought that wasn't really the way to go about it. I think they could have left. Everyone's accepting of each other's opinion on this, and that's it, right? You can have your debate after it. Union Bears and others have decided that's the way they want to go about things. That's the way they want to protest. Others should be accepting of that, and vice versa, right? So that was maybe the bit that disappointed me in there. But overall, yeah, it's a pretty horrible situation. It's not something that I'm looking to see continue with the Union Bears, because I think they give a lot to the club in terms of atmosphere, and I think we all felt that today. For me, it's not something I was going to get on board with, right? I wasn't going to walk out in the 55th minute. It's not for me. It's not the way I would do things. Like I said before, I don't criticise anyone else for doing it. The way I always look at these things is I'm just not sure that that's going to make the impact that they're looking for. It's that they're doing it with the best intentions, right? They're doing it because they love the football club the same as everyone else. They're doing it because they want change, and I totally appreciate that. But I just look at it from the board perspective sometimes. They're maybe not going to take that seriously. What they'll take seriously is people not buying their season ticket. What they'll take seriously is people not buying merchandise, not turning up to the game, buying food, drink, right? That's what they're going to take seriously, in my opinion. I just think today, look, they're allowed to, like I said, entitled to their opinion, but it just wouldn't be the way I would handle things. And yeah, I've seen the fallout from the game. I've seen people arguing on Twitter about it. It's a pretty horrible place at the moment, Twitter, when it comes to Rangers fans. It's not a nice space to be in. But look, the club is in a pretty low state at the moment, and I think what the Union Bears are saying is fair. The standards at the club are the lowest they have been. There's no doubt about that. Like, we seem like we are accepting second best right now. So I agree with that. I agree with everything they're saying. The evidence is there. Look at this season that we are having at the moment. Look at the last 2 or 3 years. It's not acceptable. And unfortunately, a lot of the decisions that the boardroom have made have kind of put us in this position. So I can't argue a lot of things the Union Bears are saying. They're well entitled to their opinion. It wouldn't be the way I would go about it. But I think both sides have to be accepting of each other. Ultimately, everyone wants the best for Rangers. Everyone's going to go about it in their own way. And hopefully we get a better Rangers at the end of it. But I think this is going to rumble on for a lot longer. Yeah,
I think it will rumble on for a lot longer. And I'll come back to you talking about the season ticket point that you mentioned there, Ross, because that's also going to come up around April time. It'll be interesting to see where we are at that stage. But Tommy, I wanted to get your thoughts. I'll bring a couple of comments first. So Aldo RFC said stand with the UB. But it was this comment from Rangers Easy OK. He said, walked out in 55. The booing and abuse of people who did was a complete disgrace. No one forced anyone to walk out. It's freedom of choice, but the people who did will be on the right side of this one. What did you make of the reaction from a lot of fans to people walking out? And what do you think it's going to just create more of a people become entrenched in what side of the argument they're on and just creates more of a divide amongst Rangers fans as this, because it's undoubtedly going to continue for a lot longer than I think anyone would like, but definitely beyond today anyway.
Yeah, there's legitimacy to that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the demonisation of any sections of the support. Right? The RSA and the Union Bears have looked at the situation, as we all have, and when it's been mismanagement, mistakes made at the highest levels, mistakes made on the pitch with the playing squad, it's not good enough. We definitely all agree in every section of the support that we want things to get better. We want Rangers to be performing and we want to start winning things. Right? That's fine. So they've looked at it and they've went, well, what's our best way to protest? This is it. Entirely up to them. They're more than right and have rights to do that level of protest. Right? And they did it. And they didn't cause any trouble in terms of exiting the stadium and anything like that. They did their thing. Best of luck to them. I'm not for booing them. I'm not for joining them in the walkout. That's up to me. I think what you'll probably find, and did find, is that people, and I'm not going to repackage what yourself and people in the comments and Ross have just said, is that people all want some level of change because it's not been good enough. We know we're watching a poor team. We know we've fallen flat on our faces several times. We know that we've wasted money. We know that we've not done the corporate side of the club and the rebuild as well as we could have, right? Then you've got investors there putting in money. Who replaces them if they go? Question mark. We've brought in new people like Patrick Stewart. We'll probably come to his statement over the weekend and stuff like that as well. Has he set the header on fire? No, but let's leave that to then. But it's the manager and the playing squad who have taken it quite rightly because they've let us down in key moments consistently. It's the only consistent thing about that team, right, is that they keep letting us down. And so people are saying, right, well, everything round about the club needs to be looked at. Yeah, I'm on board with that, right? Doesn't mean I need to walk out on the 55th minute, but I also don't need to boo the Union Bears who are just exercising their right. So I think what you'll do is you'll probably find the majority of people are in the middle there, which is I didn't boo the Union Bears, but I didn't in the RSA and I didn't join them. But I do absolutely want some level of change because I know it's not good enough. And people are looking for something to change, something to get behind, some sort of tangible action that comes out of this board that they can actually see, or indeed change driven by the supporters, which comes to, season tickets. But again, the season ticket thing, it's interesting, right? I know you want to talk about it, but I think it does drive a level of change, but at the same point in time, it does hit the club's coffers and stuff like that. And then you're saying, where does that money come from to then accelerate you to the level you want to get to? It's a very complex conversation. So I'll park that up right now. But just to get to your point, everybody should be in the position of fine to protest, fine not to agree with that. Let's not get into the space that we draw daggers on each other within the support, because that's not useful. And let's keep focused on the fact that we want this team to get better. And that's what the board and the incumbent CEO and the chairman, etc., should be focusing their attention on. The fans aren't happy. They are showing it. They will continue to be unhappy until the product on the park is better. Get on with your jobs.
Yeah, I want to, Tom, I'll stick with you. I'm going to bring up what Ross kind of spoke about there in terms of how people can maybe impact or make their feelings known more, I guess, than just walking out. And one of the points Ross raised was about not buying season tickets or not buying match tickets, not buying food and drink and all that sort of stuff when you go to the game. The season tickets one, I think, is really interesting, particularly because there's such an appetite and such a long wait currently for season tickets at Ibrox. How much of that plays into, I guess, the hands of the club as such, because people don't want to risk losing their season ticket seat and potentially have a 4, 5, 6 year wait to get a chance at another one. And I think if whether you renew right at the start of when the season ticket renewals come out or you renew at the end, it probably doesn't matter to the club, because the club will just forecast that money coming in at the deadline, and that'll be that, and doesn't really make too much of a difference to the club.
Yeah, it's one of these continuing myths, right? I'll hand my season ticket back. And I'm sure people mean it, right? But given that list of things that you just mentioned there, how much does it actually happen? People go, I'm handing back my season ticket and I'm not going back. I'm not entirely sure it ever happens, really, to be brutally honest with you, right? Because people are worried. And ultimately, particularly with a club size, the history and the fan base of Rangers, right? It's not like any other business. You know, if somebody goes like that, I really hate that car manufacturer. Well, go and buy a similar car with a different badge. Isn't anybody looking at Rangers who's a Rangers fan and going, well, I'll go and support another club? That's not how it works. You are absolutely locked into one provider, and that one provider is Rangers Football Club. Now, whether you want to buy a pie or not, fine. You know, it's in the intrinsic nature of trying to then distill how much of an impact that's had is the problem. How do you then say to the club, to the board, by the way, by us not doing this, and this is where a concerted effort and a singular, at least umbrella voice from the fan base would be useful, to say, if we don't do X, we intend to hurt you by Y. Would you want to do that in public and give other fans the ability to then kind of have a go at us and have a go at the club and underpin some of that? Probably not, right? But that's the position you're trying to say when you say, I'm going to hand my season ticket back or I'm not going to buy my European tickets. Okay, quantify it. How many? How many of those 55 quid games or whatever are not going to get purchased? What does that look like? How does that impact? And ultimately, it does impact whether you do it or not, right? If you were to do it, it would impact the amount of money that Philippe Clement gets, that Niels Copping gets, that, you know, club infrastructure. To just go back to the conversation we had, that we want things to get better, okay, but you're having a go at the investors who've pumped money in, rightly or wrongly. Who else replaces them, or who replaces the money that you don't want to put in? Now, it's a bit of a kind of, you know, vicious cycle, but ultimately in there, I don't see anybody handing back their season tickets, because everybody wants to go and do what we all want to do, which is go and watch Rangers through the bad times, through the good times, preferably the latter. But that's what we do. We turn up, right? And unfortunately, we can't go anywhere else because we are all Rangers fans, and there's only one club that will ever do for us, and they play at Ibrox. Full stop.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think I doubt this will be the last time that we speak about this on this podcast, and I think there'll be plenty of twists and turns in that situation as the season goes ahead. But the protests were strengthened, I guess, by Patrick Stewart's interview with the media yesterday. There was lots that came out of that. I felt there was lots that came out of it, but he didn't say very much either. At the same time, it was quite he said a lot, but there was no action to it, or there was no promises made or whatever. Ross, just first of all, what did you make of it? We'll delve into the kind of the three main points, I guess, in more detail around backing Philippe Clement, around the 3-month review of the the football structure within the club, and then also the discussions about transfers. But just as an overall piece, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think I agree with you in what you've said there. There wasn't too much to take from it. It wasn't groundbreaking, the things that Patrick Stewart was coming out and talking about. Probably a lot of things we expected to hear, right? I think we expected them to come out and back Philippe Clement. I didn't expect to see any sort of statement that was anything other than that, and unfortunately that's where we are at the moment. I think the majority of the support believe that this isn't the right manager, but I think the club have made it clear that they are not going to sack Philippe Clement mid-season. It's not something that they want to repeat again. And look, I can understand it from some point of view because, you don't want to get into that, reoccurring cycle. You don't want to bring someone back in. You have that bounce. Everyone thinks things are great. You go into the next season, it dips again. We've seen that in the last few years, so I get it. Personally, I don't think Philippe Clement is the right man for Rangers, and I don't think that's going to change now. As for everything else he spoke about in terms of, the type of profile of player they're targeting, there won't be short-term fixes. I've kind of heard a lot of this before, and it's probably about action for me now. I don't really need to read that part of it. I don't think he's going to get a lot of credit for that. But overall, that wasn't anything groundbreaking, was there? Coming in and saying that you're going to have an independent review, I think that's important. I would maybe argue it probably should have taken place before now, but I suppose he's not long in the job and he's maybe setting things up. But I think he's made it clear, Patrick Stewart, that he's probably not satisfied with a lot of things behind the scenes, and he wants people in there to do a review with him and essentially sort these things out. It's going to take time. Unfortunately, we're impatient as Rangers fans, and we've been in this situation for a good few years now, and we don't want to be sitting waiting. But there's only so much Patrick Stewart could have said yesterday. There's a lot of logic behind what he's saying. Ultimately, the fans aren't going to be happy about things because he's coming out and he's backing a manager that we all think isn't right, and there's a lot of protection for things that I don't think should be there in terms of the consistency of the squad and things like that. Okay. Overall, nothing groundbreaking, Craig. I'm sure we'll dig into the detail of it, but nothing that makes me shocked or, throw myself back in my chair or anything like that.
Yeah. Tommy, let's start digging into that detail, and I guess the first bit that people were desperate to hear about was what is Patrick Stewart. Fraser Thornton was also there, the new chairman at Rangers, but I think it was mainly Patrick Stewart that did speak. People were really interested to hear where Patrick Stewart personally and where the board were in terms of Philippe Clement's role, in terms of Philippe Clement's future as Rangers manager, and it resulted in Patrick Stewart giving full backing to Philippe Clement, much to the ire of many. What did you make of that? I'm just going to bring in these two comments. Sorry, first of all, as well, and then I'm keen to know what you made of that. What Gibson97 says, given the manager benefit of the doubt when it's obvious he can't break down low blocks and figured how to dominate against average teams is a massive risk. And William N01 with an interesting one. Where do you get the majority of the fans don't want Clement? From half the folk who just spout on social media. I think if you're at Ibrox today, you would know that there was a lot of frustration and a lot of anger towards it, and a lot of apathy actually towards it as well, which is almost worse. But Tommy, what did you make of Patrick Stewart and coming out and giving not only his own but the full board's back into Philippe Clement?
Yeah, it's the apathy that will kill you eventually. But I mean, what do people expect from Patrick Stewart? Right, if he's not going to back him, he's going to have to announce a sacking. Right, he can't come in and go, "I'm not sure either, guys. By the way, I'm watching him day to day." That's not how it's going to play out. So he's done exactly, and I've been saying this for weeks on the podcast that I've been on as well, that things would have to get really, really, really bad before the board were going to step in this season. Right, review at the end of the season. I mean, it's a 3-month review that takes you into the back end of April anyway. Right, it's not as if he's not being overly cute with the timeline. Right, the point being that given that there's been, I mean, you'd expect any CEO and any chairman to come in and want to put their own imprint on the club, right? That's quite right. So all it was only ever going to be is a story about Philippe Clement saying we're backing him. He's the man in the chair. Don't expect anything to change. Right, that sorts out the winter window, sorts out some of that noise, and we're conducting our own review with an in-house and an outsourced organisation to see what we're going to do. What that does do, though, to some extent, is raise questions of the incumbent board members who have built this structure and keep telling us over the last few years, this is top tier stuff, right? So you're going to review the football operations when you've just promoted Niels Coppen into being a wider scope, right? And you did that through a review. I think what drives a lot of people crazy and the support when they're looking at this stuff is it always seems like we don't actually have a defined strategy and get it right. And we just reach for the nearest person who's already inside the club and go, do you want more scope? Because stuff needs to be done, right? Grab a brush, right? We'll make you director of facilities as well while you're at it, right? That type of thing. And then we get somebody coming in. What you're hoping for, though, if I go on the bright side of the road is, right, they've sat down and they've said, let's do a full written branch review and see where we go. The problem with that, though, is you end up saying, right, there's a 3-year plan, right? And I think most people in the support are sick and tired of 3-year plans and 5-year plans, and the fact that they never seem to really come to any evolution or fruition. But ultimately, you come back to the point that this is 2 new people in the door, and they've been given the remits, and they're trying to put their stamp on it, and they're trying to lead us forward as well. The first big thing that will come from them, forget any bloody reviews at this point in time, right? The first big thing that will come for them is, what do they do? What horse do they back come the end of the season? And how does now in the end of the season play out? Because the only conversation in town is, what do you do with Philippe Clement? That's it. And that'll be the first big reckoning test for Thornton and Stewart. That's it. Everything else is subject to the other pages of their review. It's how do they do that? And then how do we refresh the squad again?
Yeah, Ross, that question, what do you do with Philippe Clement, is it's been one we've spoken about at length, time and time again. Both you and I have been on the record that we felt Philippe Clement should have been sacked. I was going to say weeks ago, but probably months ago now when we first started talking about it. I don't think my view has changed on that one. But I was listening to a lot of people after the Patrick Stewart stuff came out yesterday, and I was listening to them say, well, if you sack him now, you've got a caretaker to the end of the season. If you don't sack him now, then it doesn't actually make any difference because you're still looking at a new manager in the summer. What was your view on that, and what's your view, I guess? Does it make a difference that he's got us playing well in Europe, and actually we're potentially 1-1 away from securing our last 16th place in the Europa League and doing something sort of really positive in Europe where you earn more money, and then that can then impact the project as it follows on. And then you've got the continued question of, and we'll go on to talk about the January transfer window, but do you give Philippe Clement money to spend in January if you think he's not going to be there in the summer? And then what impact does that have as well? Where do you stand up though on the we should sack him now and get a caretaker versus actually it doesn't matter if he stays to the end of the season because he's not going to be manager next year anyway?
Look, it's a tough one. I think for me, if you know, which I don't believe the Rangers board are at that point, they'll probably still be assessing the situation. Patrick Stewart, I'm sure in his mind, won't be sitting there and going, Philippe Clement is finished at the end of the season. I don't think that will be the case. If you're asking me personally, if you don't think he is the right manager for Rangers, he should be sacked now. You don't give him the season. If he's not the right man for Rangers, you remove him and you bring someone in that can facilitate the club till the end of the season, and you start drawing up plans to replace him. That looks like it's not going to happen. The thing I found interesting from Patrick Stewart's comments was around results improving. You know, we back Philippe, let's make that clear, but results have to improve. My question would be, how bad does it have to get? Like, how bad does it really have to get? It's 15 points. It's 13 points and 33 away from home. We're looking at a really, really poor level of performance here. I don't really know what level it has to get to. Has Aberdeen fallen off a cliff helped us here? Because if Aberdeen continued their consistency that they had at the beginning of the season, I don't know if Philippe Clement would still be here.
Yeah, the answer to that's an absolute yes, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this now on WhatsApp as well. Absolutely. I think if they were breathing down the neck or they were still second, you're absolutely right, then that would change the dynamics of the conversation. Absolutely. And then, therefore, I think you're keeping them for the wrong reasons then. Because that second is never going to be acceptable. You can talk about rebuilds, you can talk about stories, you can talk about projects. I am not seeing any evidence in this Rangers team, results, performances, whatever,
that convinces me that Philippe Clement is a long-term answer. I don't see anything. I genuinely mean it. I'm not just saying that for effect. I honestly mean it. I don't see anything. You can argue about the European performances, but Giovanni Van Bronckhorst took us to a European final. He was sacked 3 months later. So it can't have that big a bearing on the club. They must look at domestic performances being more important, and that's the way I would look at it personally. I just think it was the same again today, and I don't want to be too harsh on today, right? It's a 3-1 win, but I think you just seen a lot of the same problems we've seen with Philippe Clement today. I just think they're all there in front of us. But it looks like we're going to limp on until the end of the season. I can understand a lot of the support being very frustrated about that. I've kind of got to the point myself, I've accepted it now. I've accepted he's going to be here till the end of the season. I'm not going to really get myself worked up about it. But if you had to ask me honestly about the whole caretaker situation and, if you're going to get to the end of the season, you're going to sack him, I would just remove him. If you don't believe he's the right man for the job, you remove him now and you deal with it after. I understand the argument about who would you bring in, and it doesn't matter. And if the argument is around like we can't keep sacking managers, for me, you back the right manager. You have to have the right manager first for that to work. I don't see the evidence. It's not there for me. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, Tommy, I asked you this question during the game actually, and I'm going to ask you now to see if you've had any different thoughts, but also so you can share your thoughts with the listeners. If you're Philippe Clement at the moment, what are you thinking? Are you thinking I'm going to turn this round and I'm going to still have a job next season, or is your agent out there in Europe touting you about for jobs?
Well, as far as I'm aware, so I'll give you a slightly longer answer than I did in the gantry because it was too cold to talk. He still believes he's the man to turn it round, right? From what I'm aware of, right? He thoroughly believes that he's getting a younger squad put together. It's shown some level of forward momentum. Momentum's definitely the wrong word there, right? But he can see things that we evidently can't, and he's got some backing from the new board members to be able to say, right, I can take it on again, right? He thoroughly believes that. Now comes a moment when confidence ticks over into isolationism, right? And you just locked yourself in a wee box and telling yourself you're doing a good job. But if I was him, also maybe not him, but if I was his agent, I'd be out in Europe going, Rangers made promises and they never kept them. They've got unrealistic expectations about where they are. They're on a trajectory because they've having to rebuild the entire business and the club internally and all that type of stuff. And I've been subject to multiple boardroom changes round about me. Some of them absolutely at the drop of a hat, and I've had to step into things that no manager should. And I'm tying it all together. And look, I've still managed to keep us on the road in Europe and win a cup and get to this final, get to that final, and it's just not quite working. Look what I'm up against, look what I'm working with. I mean, if his agent's not out doing that in Europe, then his agent's not doing the right job, would be my kind of comment to that. But do I think that Philippe Clement is actively trying to get out of the club? No, I don't. But that's not the manager's job. It should be the board's job who then look at it and go, you are the right person or not. I get what Ross is saying, but I'll go back to what I've been saying for weeks. It would take something absolutely disastrous for Rangers to pull the trigger on him before the end of the season.
I find it fascinating. Football might be one of the only industries, I'm sure there's others, but football might be one of the only industries where you can stand in the middle of a stadium and there's 50,000 people around you, there's protests going on, there's singing, there's singing negatively about you, there's booing, and you just stand there and think, I can still turn this round. I mean, there's no real part of you that if that happened in my day-to-day job, I'm not sure I'd have the confidence to then go.
Every time I walk through the office, people are chucking things at me, right? But I mean, to remember, I'm with you on that, right? But there's two parts to that as well, which is we're talking and we're doing it the same thing everybody else does. We're mixing it all up, right? But there's the club infrastructure and the board level investment and infrastructure and rebuilding decisions that have been made from the board that have been incorrect or haven't worked out, versus Philippe Clement should specifically just be on top of how are this team performing. And so, that's what he's looking at. There was a lot of this, sack the board. There's a lot of this, we want full infrastructure change. That's driven, obviously, by you not performing on the pitch. But the manager's only job, and he's failing at it at the moment, let me be very, very clear about that, is get a level of performance out of the players that are available to you on the pitch. Now, we've consistently not been able to beat teams that we should have been. And that's why people are singing his name. But he's got a level of confidence. I don't think you step into a manager's job unless you can say, I'm the man for this, right? And I'll turn it round. And he believes he's got the backing and he's got a strategy and he's got a philosophy and he's got a plan that will lead us back into something. The question then becomes, will the fan base give him time? I think the jury's pretty much sorted on that one. Can he win over the new board members and the investors to say, now we go round the track again next season with him? And the only thing that will answer that probably is what happens between now and the end of the season on the pitch in terms of results, in terms of performances. But he's going to have to find, and this team's going to have to find an extra couple of years for him, because nothing so far has been able to say he'll be able to turn it round to get people back on board again.
Craig, just on Tommy's point there, and I agree with a lot of it, there's no doubt Philippe Clement has been dealt a pretty poor hand. There is no doubt that he was sold something different than what is actually materialising at the moment. That is completely fair, and Philippe Clement is allowed to back that up and justify his actions here and maybe the performance of the side. The way I look at it is, and the problem I have with that, okay, you have been dealt a poor hand, but there's no doubt in my mind this Rangers side should be performing at a better level than it is at. Okay? And I think what has lost a lot of fans in the last month was the comments leading up to the Old Firm and the Tottenham game talking about budgets. And you're trying to, dumb down expectations and say, we're going into these games against sides that have much bigger budgets than us. And then you can't beat the other SPFL sides in the league that have a fraction of the budget that Rangers have. You can't have it both ways. If you want to bring up that argument, it's going to get thrown back at you every single week when you don't get results against Dundee, Hibs, Motherwell, St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Aberdeen. It's going to get chucked back at you. You can't then just go, but it's all about a project, guys. It's all about a rebuild. Now, you spoke about budgets last week, leading up to big games. So that's going to get tossed at you now. For me, this team should be at a much higher level than they are at. I think if we're all honest, all of us expected that it would be a very difficult season, and likelihood would be that Celtic would go on and win the title. I think if we're all honest, that was the way we kind of looked at it. But there has to be a challenge. It's never going to be acceptable to be 15 points behind in January. It's never going to be acceptable to only get 13 points out of 33. I think it's 4 wins in his last 16 away from home. So that's into last season as well.
Yeah.
There's no, I'm sorry. It's just, that's never going to, the fans are never going to be daft enough to buy that. Regardless of the hand you've been dealt, they're not going to buy into that. And I think that's the frustration at the moment.
No, I think you're spot on with that. I don't think anybody, I don't think anybody, certainly I don't think anybody in this, on this podcast thinks any different to that. He has been dealt a better hand than the majority of managers he's come up against. Right? Whether he was promised certain things that didn't materialise, he's still in a better position. You're right, the level of performances have never been good enough. And if you want to add another kind of line to that tombstone, if you like, with regards to budgets, you'll see the best of this team in October or November type of time. Well, you're back into January now, so was it a very, very short window? And then they go back to being dross again. And yeah, these types of comments do not work well with them. He's now got to the position with the fan base generally, which is even a good performance is just a case of, but it'll be back to the usual nonsense next week. And once you get to that place where people have got no belief in you or belief in the fact that you've got the credit, once you lose credibility, you can't get it back. Right, it is absolutely impossible to then build that back in because people are just waiting for the next catch you moment. And unfortunately, that's where Philippe Clement has gotten to. Likeable guy, no doubt, really wanted to do well. Can he turn it around? Well, he's going to have some stellar end to the season, which includes a Scottish Cup. Right, it's really that simple. And even then, would people really want to go again with him next season? Yeah, I agree with you on that. The performances have been nowhere near good enough. Nobody can buy that. Nobody can buy that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're just approaching the hour mark, so quickly, just before we kind of finish off, I was keen to touch on the transfer part of the discussion, Ross, where he said that we'll bring in likely 1, maybe 2 this transfer window. We were on a podcast, I've lost track of days, to be honest, over the Christmas period into January. We were on a podcast at some point over that time where you said the January transfer window would be a big sign to us as to whether Philippe Clement's been backed or he's not. To me, that says he's not been backed, but I'm also then questioning what the finances like, and do we have the money to actually go out and spend, or do we not? Where do you stand on that sort of discussion point after hearing we won, maybe two?
Yeah, I think the comments from Patrick Stewart maybe changed my perception on this a little, because he was really pushing the narrative that the club sign players now, not the manager. The manager will always have a say. They have the ability to challenge signings, but ultimately the club will sign the player that the manager will be involved in. So maybe it changed the dynamic slightly. I would maybe argue if you are fully invested in this manager, you would recognise that we have a bit of a defensive crisis at the moment, and you would be going into the market to give him the best possible chance. It doesn't sound like we're going to be doing that. It sounds very much like we had no intention of short-term fixes. Anyone coming in will be with the view of a long-term deal. Okay, whether that's a loan with an obligation, loan with an option that you'll assess end of season, whatever, it's going to be someone that we believe that can come into Rangers and make a difference over the next couple of years. So maybe my perception of it slightly changed based on those quotes from Patrick Stewart. And what I'll be clear with is that is exactly how it should be. That's what should be happening. The club should be signing players, and regardless of the manager, regardless of the manager, that was terrible the way I put that. Regardless of the manager, the club should be signing players, right? That's the way it should be. Michael Beale is a perfect example of that. Ross Wilson left. We decided to give Michael Beale the biggest budget in history, and he blew it completely. And that is the reason why we're in the position we're in right now. So the structure looks to be in place now. Patrick Stewart's pushing that forward. But yeah, I think still, if you get to the end of the window and say we bring in one loan deal, I think Philippe Clement, quite rightly in the statement as well, Patrick Stewart said Philippe will be pushing back. He will be challenging the board for more signings and more players, as he should. And obviously Patrick Stewart was talking about he will then push back and ask to get more of his squad, use his squad. I think it will still tell you really what the answer is. If it's one lone player, Philippe Clement's going to be going and knocking on Patrick Stewart's door and saying, I don't have enough. You've not given me enough. And maybe that will be the telling side at the end of the season. But yeah, the overall comments in terms of who's signing players now, it's exactly the way it should be. That is a real positive from those comments from Patrick Stewart. It's the real one I'll pick out and go, that's how the club should be operating.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and we're past the hour mark now, so I think we'll probably round off.
Well, just one very quick one. It would have been silly of Patrick Stewart to come out and say it's going to be 5 or 6. That would have been silly. So he's kept it to a reasonable minimum. If the club end up doing more business, then that's a positive news story. You don't go and lead with your chin on this stuff.
I think we were all expecting the worst when Philippe Clement said, yeah, the new CEO is just going to come out and tell you how our transfer window is going to go. He's never going to come out and say, yeah, we've got a £30 million budget. Who wants the money? Is he? So he's I think we were all fearing.
We just have a 50 million bid for Riga Man the other day, so we'll sell him for 50. We'll give Clement 30. It's all going to be fine. Yes, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't envisage that being how that conversation went. To be fair,
goes back to the fact that Niels Coppen becomes more and more intrinsically important to this football club. He did notice in Patrick Stewart's comments as well. He says, him and Niels Coppen speak daily, and then him and the manager speak regularly. They're very different things.
Yeah, it very much is. Well, thank you very much to Ross and Tommy for joining us tonight. Thank you very much, everyone who's tuned in and listened. It's been great having all your comments come through as well. If you've enjoyed the video, please drop a like. It helps us massively. Please subscribe wherever you listen, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, any of the audio platforms as well. It means you won't miss out on any of the content we've got upcoming. Next for us, I believe, is the Aberdeen game, Ibrox, which I'm sure we're all really looking forward to watching. And it'll be Kyle and myself who are there on the gantry, so we'll be live with your post match from Ibrox from there. But thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Until next time.